On this date I say to His Excellency the Minister of War and Marine what I now copy. Excellent Sir, on having the satisfaction of addressing Your Excellency for the first time, with the object of reporting to you the conclusion of the war that was started in this country against the American forces for its defense, I beg Your Excellency not to look upon my statements with vexation, because although they may be simple, they are stamped with the character of truth. It is very probable that Captain Don Jose Maria Flores, who was invested with the political and military commands of this department, when the citizens of this town, with daring hand, launched the cry of liberty and independence to which we were bound by the sacrifices of the fathers of the country, must have informed the supreme government in full detail of the state in which the country was left at the time that Don Jose Castro, who was the Commandant General, departed, of the manner in which the uprising that took place in this city began, as well as the situation in which the department found itself at the moment of departure of the aforesaid Senor Flores for interior points of the Republic. And for the same reason I omit mentioning those facts, more especially since I have seen in a period of time part of the events that occurred in California. Consequently, I pass along to my principal and real object. After the last battle had taken place, in which we fought as far as possible, and in which the valiant defenders made a vigorous resistance, it became necessary for Don Jose Maria Flores, Commandant General and Chief of the volunteer companies, to take his departure from the country, as much to save his life, which would have been in danger at the hands of our enemies if he had had the misfortune to have been taken prisoner by them, as well as because the morale of the people had fallen, due to the total lack of resources, and also that he might report to the supreme government. I was left, for that reason, in command of the small force of volunteer defenders of the fatherland, by virtue of the fact that I held the rank of Major General, although without hopes of even the smallest success, because I no longer flattered myself that we might attain a victory. Consoled by the thought that Senor Flores might be listened to, and that with him present the first magistrate would not abandon us, and managing to prove that force and force alone would prevent us from yielding to the domination of our uncalled-for enemies, together with my compatriots we made the last efforts, notwithstanding the extreme lack of powder, arms, men, and all kinds of supplies. Thus it was that, seeing ourselves, some 118 men, including the officers, poorly armed and without any more ammunition than 2 cannon shots and a few for our muskets, threatened by more than 700 soldiers and marines who were occupying this city and lay at my rear under the command of Commodore Stockton, and very close to 600 on my front, not far away under orders of Colonel J.C. Frémont, both forces with good armament, sufficient ammunition of all calibers and superior pieces of artillery, well manned and with all equipment. I nevertheless wished to give the last impulse to save the country and to guarantee the lives and properties of the inhabitants that had been for some time at the mercy and will of the occupying force since the revolt of the country. We accomplished this in the most honorable way that we could in times as difficult as those that surrounded us, as Your Excellency will see by copy of the treaties which I enclose for your attention. Likewise, there remained in our hands, in spite of the fact that it is not expressly so declared, all the arms that were considered personal property, which consisted mainly of lances that, with a great deal of effort, had been made in this same country during the rule of Senor Flores. Of the number and kinds of armament that we delivered, according to the agreement in the capitulation, Your Excellency will learn from the copy of the receipt, which I have the satisfaction of enclosing for you, marked number 2, that one of the pieces of artillery was the identical gun lost by General Kearny in the action at San Pasqual. Your Excellency will observe that in the accompanying copy there appear only the articles of capitulation, without the preamble giving the reasons or grounds upon which I supported myself in entering into the treaties, which reason I have already shown, moreover, to be this, that, finding ourselves in a place utterly lacking in stationary supplies, and it being necessary according to the agreement to conclude that same day, it was agreed that on arriving at the capital the terms would be set down in a more formal fashion, making such modifications as might be necessary, I being pledged to agree to this in spite of the fact that I distrusted the carrying out of the above, for the reason that the enemy had news of the dispersion of our forces, which I feared, and of which he took advantage to make claims about things which had been satisfactory before. The result was that we saw ourselves obliged to yield and remain silent until the longed-for day shall come, when we shall again see ourselves free and happy beneath the shadow of our symbolic flag. This was the end, excellent sir, of the struggle carried on by the inhabitants of California against the invaders of our country during the space of 4 months, by dint of great sacrifices, without any other help than their loyalty in suffering the vicissitudes and hardships of war, nor any other protection than that of divine providence, who seemed to protect the sacred cause that was heroically defended by a handful of men who sprang to arms to recover their lost liberty. I suppose that your excellency has found out that, since the movement that was led by Señor Flores was made with great suddenness, it prevented a reunion here of the officers of the army who had scattered from this place clear to Sonora, that being the reason some of them were prisoners during all the time of the revolt, and would have been unable to obtain their freedom if the capitulation had not been made, after which time they were again able to breathe more freely. Subsequent to the treaties, I had the idea of assembling said officers, so as to go and present myself with them before the supreme government. But this has unfortunately been prevented by the state of misery in which they find themselves, because it is now more than a year since they have received their salaries, and because there have been no opportunities, due to the lack of vessels sailing from here to the coasts of Mexico, for even the foreign vessels that have come from those same coasts are being detained here with the limitations that they cannot touch at the Mexican ports in the meantime. And although we might have been able to take our departure by land, today it is impossible due to the general uprising of the Indians of the country clear to the Colorado River. This, then, excellent sir, forces me to recommend to you these officers, as well as the volunteers and some families that were left orphaned in consequence of the war, and I beg your excellency to have the goodness to place all this in the superior knowledge of His Excellency, the President of the Republic. Likewise, I wish to report that since the time that the treaties were made up to the present date, although there have been frequent removals of the military authorities on land, of commodores and of some who have been called governors, whose rules have been very short, said treaties have always been respected and complied with on both parts. This occasion gives me the opportunity to offer your excellency my attention and to assure you of due respect and subordination. I forward this to your excellency to the end that through you it will be sent to His Excellency the President of the Republic, for the uses that may be found convenient. God and Liberty, City of Los Angeles in Alta, California, April 5th, 1847. Andrés Pico, His Excellency the Governor of Alta California, Don Pío Pico.